Hey there, Wastelanders, and welcome back to War Games News Radio for another Fallout Wasteland Warfare product review. This time around, we're taking a look at the Commonwealth Wave expansion for the game, and it is unreal. The great folks at Modiphius were kind enough to send us an early copy of this 50 pages of glossy awesomeness here in the book, and it brings a ton of new depth to the game. It's got all kinds of features loaded in here, everything from model galleries, painting guides, new rules for terrain, different areas of the wasteland to help you thematically plan your battles. And not just that, there's also some faction reviews as well as a whole host of new scenarios. A small linked campaign and some standalone missions as well. So we're going to take a look at this in all of its glory, and we're going to go through everything that comes in this pack, from the scenarios to the cards and all of the new rules. So let's get into it. First up, let's take a look at the cards. So on top of the book itself, which includes all the rules and all that fun stuff you need to actually implement the expansion, it also includes all of the new unit cards, faction cards, a bunch of new quests, items, lots of fun stuff in there. And these cards, these are punch out, which come on all of these sheets. Modiphius started using this sort of layout and this way of delivering the expansions with the new Vegas wave, which we have over here as well. And if you take a look at these two books by comparison, well, there isn't much of a comparison. I mean, this was a great job and a great book with the new Vegas guide, but this new Commonwealth expansion really takes things to another level. It's not a hardback book, but it's got a little bit more rigidity to it, a little bit nicer production, I'll say, and man, oh man, it is just heads and tails. And same goes with the cards. We got the old courier card here, and with the old punch out, there's these perforated edges around here on the sides. You used to have to go in with a hobby knife and sort of trim these up, but the new cards, as you can see, they just pop right out. There's Swan, his reference card, in all of his glory, and you can see by comparison, well, there again isn't much comparison. They are much smoother, much cleaner. Same goes with the unit cards. We've got the Gunner Commander here. Now you can feel a bit of an edge, so you can feel where they were sort of locked into the sheet there, but not nearly as noticeable as the new Vegas cards. And also the card stock is a little bit different. It's a little bit of a higher sheen, I think. Overall, I'm going to give these cards 2 big thumbs up. The new Vegas ones were still great. A lot of people had complaints about these. I actually enjoyed going through and unpunching all of the cards and sleeving them and all that fun stuff. But these are heads and tails, even better than the previous round. I like to put them in some of these little sleeves here just to have, a little bit extra protection, and then you really can't feel any sort of perforation as well. This is just me, but what I like to do is I like to take the AI card for the unit and put it on the backside. That way I've got all of the AI units and information whenever I'm playing a game right there on the inverse side. But that's just me. You can do them however you like, but I really do recommend picking up some sleeves from your local hobby store. Super easy to do, and they keep your cards in great shape. Top of the regular size cards, we've also got some of the smaller Euro size with perks, leaders, new items, lots of new quests, all kinds of fun things that can help add some depth to your game. But as great as the cards are, the book itself is even better. As mentioned, 50 pages, all kinds of new additions in here, paint guides, miniature gallery, but we're not going to go through every page of the book like this. We're going to take a look at it virtually on the PDF. So let's get going here. First page we have is actually an achievements list. This was something that was introduced in the new Vegas expansion, and they're kind of like mini quests that you can keep track of and complete as you go through your games. They're not just a fun little vanity badge type thing. You can also use them in settlement mode as a way to add additional caps when completing your mission. So that's a lot of fun, something to keep track of while you're playing your games, and again adds a bit of a thematic campaign sort of progression to your games. And then we get into the good stuff, the new rules. So let's take a look at the scatter terrain rules, because there are actually 2 different types. Now all of these rules apply to the different terrain packs that you can get through Modiphius on their website or their printable STLs, but of course you could proxy these with different products and different terrain units that you have at home as well. But the nice thing is that it gives you a list here of the type of terrain piece and the type of effects that it can generate. Now keep in mind this is all optional and can be used to add another level of playability and interactability, if that's a word. So you don't have to use these rules whenever these pieces of terrain are in play, but I don't know why you wouldn't, because they're a ton of fun. There's some stuff that we've seen before, like exploding cars, radioactive barrels. All of that shouldn't be very new if you've played a handful of games of Wasteland Warfare already. But what's more interesting are things like the armor workbench. So if you have an armor workbench up on the battlefield, then any non-creature, non-robot model in base-to-base contact with a workbench can use an expertise action to apply or remove a single mod item from their inventory. So kind of cool that you can go interact with a terrain piece and upgrade your gear, much like you're playing a game of Fallout. And then we've got some more advanced things like the crashed vertibird, which is a great terrain piece which you can get your hands on either physically or as a 3D print piece from Modiphius. And interacting with this by performing, is it a search? Yeah, a search skill. If you get a crit, then you find the black box of the crashed vertibird worth 200 caps. Other more sort of gameplay mechanic wise things, the junk barricades, which is probably my new favorite piece of terrain. Model whose line of cover passes through a junk barricade. The junk barricade counts as 2 pieces of cover rather than 1. Similar to that, the military barricades, models whose line of cover passes through the military barricade may re-roll the result of their armor die, but you have to take the second result even if it's worse. So already on page 3 of this expansion, we have a brand new rule set which adds a really interesting layer of playability and takes these static terrain pieces and turns them into a really dynamic piece of scenery. And that's just the first part and the effect terrain. Then we go down to container terrain here, and this applies to things like objective markers or the ice boxes, printable lockers, all the fun stuff that you can find in either the Modiphius terrain packs or their printable terrain packs. And these work a little bit differently compared to your traditional searchable marker. For example, when you get in contact with one of let's say the ammo case terrain, for example, when you're in contact with the ammo case, you may interact similar to a search test here, and if you are successful, you get to roll on a table with a D20. So you need a standard D20 to make these work, but you roll the D20 and whatever number you get is the item that you draw. And each piece of terrain has a different sort of threshold and a different number of items that you can gain from it. So for example, the ammo case can get you anything from a piece of custom ammo, a heavy weapon mount, all the way up to a Fat Man mini nuke launcher, while something like the ice box gives you, blood packs, nuka cherries, a beer, a whiskey. So thematic items to the piece of terrain, which again, really, really cool. Long and the short of it for the container rules is that if you got a D20 and a handful of cards, you can easily make a couple quick search rolls and get some items. So I really think that this is going to help speed up gameplay when it comes to searching, scavenging, all that fun Fallout-y goodness. And there are a ton of items that you can get your hands on using this new rule set, and it's just really cool to see how now every single piece of terrain has its own discrete rule set in it. I think this is really going to help bring this terrain to life. Now keep in mind that all of this is optional, so you don't have to implement these rules whenever you're playing with one of these pieces of terrain, but honestly I don't know why you wouldn't. As long as you've got the cards or are using the Fallout Wasteland Warfare app, it's pretty easy to use these rules and to integrate them into your game. But I think this is really cool, and I think a lot of people are going to take advantage of this. Continuing on through the book, we have a rundown here of how exploding cars work, radioactive barrels, so really rounds out all of the different terrain options that were already available in Wasteland Warfare prior to the release of this expansion. And then we get into a bit of a models gallery with some of the terrain pieces available. So we've got some objective markers, terminals, the crash UFO, which has its own cool little terrain rule added in there as well, junk barricades, military barricades, and the robot workshop. And then we get into the region rules, which helps add a little bit of a thematic flavor to your games by placing them in a certain area of the wasteland, all with their own unique rules, wasteland decks, danger card decks, and really does a lot of the math and heavy lifting for you when it comes to scenario setup. They've taken different areas that you can encounter in Fallout games and replicated them for the tabletop with their own slightly tweaked rule set. So let's take a look at the downtown Boston, for example. Here you can see that it's got a wasteland deck, an item deck built for you, an event deck, danger deck, creature deck, and a stranger deck. Each one of these environments has these pre-packed wasteland decks, so you don't have to go through and think, okay, how many weapons am I going to add? How many events do I need? It's all right here for you to just put your decks together and get playing. On top of that, you also have a specific region special rule for each one of these regions. Downtown Boston, synth positive whenever a model with the keyword synth makes a skill roll to resolve a stranger card. They may roll 2 dice instead of 1 and pick which result to take. So for downtown Boston, anything with a synth gets an advantage roll, essentially. Some of the rules are a little bit more intense. As you'll see in the Boston suburbs, we have a rule called Swan's Pond, which essentially at the beginning of the game you roll a blue die, and if you roll the nuke, then Swan and or a superhuman behemoth comes onto the field. So that's going to really change the way that mission is going to go, I think, if you're able to bring a super mutant behemoth onto the board. And also has a second rule called free parking, where you roll a black die, and depending on the number of damage icons you roll, that's how many exploding cars that you can add to the battle. And of course, that's not all. We've got the Raider Den, super mutant camp, abandoned factory, glowing sea, non-functioning vault, pre-war checkpoint, red rocket, the list just go on. So you've got lots of different options for now where to set your battles, add some new flavor as far as special rules, and again, you've got all of your item decks, your Wasteland decks, all that fun stuff pre-generated for you to use to cut down on setup time. That covers it for new rules that come in the expansion, but that's not all that's in this book, of course. As mentioned, we've got a miniatures gallery here, which goes through all of the different railroad, gunner, creature, super mutant, and robot units that you can find in this expansion. But on top of the gallery here, we also have guides for prepping your miniatures, assembling your models, painting your minis, and lots of different guides to help you do that and to find some colors. All the ones suggested here are all from the Army Painter range, but of course you can use whatever you've got your hands on, Citadel, Reaper, you name it, you name it. But I like the Army Painter myself, so I'll probably be using a lot of these guides myself. And not just the Commonwealth stuff, as you can see here, it also goes back to some of the original factions, the original three, if you will, Survivors, Mutants, Brotherhood of Steel. So it gives you some different guides for a lot of different characters, a Vault Dweller, paint guide, that's going to be super handy for sure. Power armor guides, combat armor guides, it just keeps going on and on. And then we get into faction strategy guides. These are great little quick rundowns of some of the different factions and the units that come in their boxes. They can really help you better know a faction. Well, okay, no, stop. It's the wrong series, wrong video. That's that. This is it's a different thing. They don't go over every unit and every special rule, but they give you a really good jumping off point on how to get started in any one faction. There is one noticeable mission here, and that's the Enclave. For whatever reason, they didn't make it out into the book. I think it has to do with the timing of when they were released and when this was in pre-production, but at any rate, the Enclave is a shadowy government organization anyway, so maybe they're keeping their information under wraps. But we do have write-ups on the newer factions here in the game, the Gunners, the Railroad, all of which you can find their cards and their information in this new expansion. And if you want to wrap your head around some of these different units and their different faction abilities, then of course check out my faction reviews, which should be popping up in and around one of these spaces around my head here. Once we're done going through all the factions, that brings us to a new mini campaign called Home on the Radioactive Range. This is a 3-part mini campaign which focuses on using the Brahmin, which are a new unit and new unit card, which you can get your hands on in this expansion. It's all about a bunch of Brahmin rustlers and some homesteaders trying to keep tabs on their radioactive cows. And it's a ton of fun and uses a lot of different models and a lot of different units that you can find in this expansion. On top of the campaign missions, there's also 3 standalone missions, one involving Swan, the super mutant behemoth, another involving some robots, which is a ton of fun. This would be a great scenario to use with the Mechanist model. And then lastly, we've got a mission called the Shortcut, which is kind of like running through a canyon, getting attacked by all kinds of creepy crawlies. Tons of fun, all of these missions. I've played a couple of them already, and they are just awesome. So we'll definitely get some campaign action going on here on the channel sooner than later. And once we get our hands on that Swan model, I have a feeling we're gonna bring him on to the channel as well. And then we close out the book here with a complete card list of all of the fun stuff that you can get your hands on in this book. All in all, this is a wicked value. You've got everything from these new campaign rules, the achievement mini quests, the terrain rules, painting guides. This is easily the most fulsome and robust expansion to Wasteland Warfare to date. New Vegas was good. This is great. So I'm gonna give this 5 out of 5 Ryans out of 2. I don't know what my scale works on, but I'm definitely gonna recommend y'all go and pick this out. So huge thank you to Modiphius for letting us take a look at this early, and it's been hard keeping this under wraps, let me tell you. But it's out now, it's ready for you to pick up. Go check it out at your local gaming store, or of course the Modiphius website, which you can find links to that down below. And I'm really excited to integrate some of these new rules into more videos and battle reports. For example, if you want to check out how the new junk barricades work with their 2-point of cover rule, then check out the Minutemen versus Gunners video popping up here. The Gunners made a wicked impression on their first channel debut here, and we've got lots more Commonwealth content and battle reports and reviews coming your way. So as ever, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned because WGNR will be back.